What does it mean to be blessed? So Q&A this morning. What does it mean? All right, to be alive? All right, there we go, just to be alive. Anybody else? Health? Right?
To be saved.
All right, to be saved. What does that mean? No, I'm just... I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. That's good. We're already doing the Ask the Pastor thing, right? Yeah, what does it mean to be blessed? We're going to spend the next few Sundays actually looking at this particular question between now and Advent. What does it mean to be blessed? Hashtag blessed. How many of you heard hashtag blessed? Right. Hashtag blessed is now a part of our social media culture, right? The hashtag, this particular hashtag, has been so overused that it now has its own meme. In fact, it's been around a while. It's also one of the older ones. But hashtag blessed has been used to describe all sorts of things in our culture. Hashtag blessed can describe a trip to Slitterbahn for the weekend. Getting discounts at H-E-B. Hashtag blessed. Right? Getting the parking space right next to the store you're going into. Hashtag blessed. And then there's the too blessed to be stressed cliche that also shows up in our social media. Worse, hashtag blessed has also been used. By the way, this is all the usage. So we could use, that's bless your heart. We're going to get to that in a minute. But hashtag blessed has been used to describe all sorts of things, including subtly one-upping people with what amounts to a humble brag. Right, have you seen those types of hashtag blessed? Somebody gets a promotion that somebody else didn't, hashtag blessed. You know, well, my kids made the honor roll. Your kids didn't, hashtag blessed. And this even showed up, and Hawal's going to love this. Hashtag blessed the Washington Nationals. Won and the Astros did not. And again, you see hashtag blessed with something like the Washington Nationals, all of a sudden then, what are we saying about the Houston Astros? That they're not hashtag blessed, right? Oh yeah, well, let's not go there. Here's what one New York Times writer said about the hashtag blessed phenomenon. There's nothing quite like invoking holiness. I lost my guy. Oh, sweetie. Go to the next one. There we go. There's nothing quite like invoking holiness as a way to brag about your life. But calling something blessed has become the go-to term for those who want to boast about an accomplishment while pretending to be humble, fish for a compliment, acknowledge a success without sounding too conceited, or purposely elicit envy. We've never, ever done that, have we? And down here in the South, you saw this a little bit ago, down here in the South, every once in a while you hear somebody say, well, bless your heart. Well, if somebody who is my senior, now if I'm out in public and somebody who is my senior says this to me, I take it that they're sincere. But this phrase has taken on a life of its own. More often than not, it's the subtle put down here in the South, right? Bless your heart, really, it has no blessing. Rather, it's an insult that's sitting underneath what sounds to be a very pious way of blessing somebody. And then you sneeze. Bless you. God bless you. My question is, when somebody says God bless you with what? You know, it's a go-to phrase. It's one of these almost like a throwaway phrase. It's just our response of acknowledging somebody sneezing. We have all this talk of blessed. Hashtag blessed, bless your heart, God bless you. What does it mean to be blessed? And more often than not, if you take all these things and put it together, all these things, that we see in our social media especially, you come away with this idea that to be blessed means to enjoy the good life, the great times, the good marriage, the great job, super friends, fame, fortune, financial stability, financial security. Is this what it means to be blessed? If we were to do an analysis on the way #blessed is used on social media, and even the way we sometimes use it in our own vocabulary, we'd have to admit that more often than not, we ourselves come to think of being blessed in these terms. Somehow, some way, God is smiling on my self-sufficiency. Somehow, some way, God is showing His pleasure on what I've been able to accomplish on my own. My needing nobody's help. Me making it on my own. And God has given me all this material stuff. He must be blessing me, right? And if God has given me all this, then I really don't need anything else to fill me up, do I? I have no needs for God to fill. If this is what we mean by blessed. So how do you know that you or someone else is truly blessed? What evidence or what determination are you going to use? And what really does it matter? So we're left with this. When we come to the text that we look at, both of them this morning, both the Psalm and in Matthew, we come to think, or we come to begin to see, that maybe, just maybe, there isn't an external measurement for what it means to be blessed. That just maybe, it's something internal. Something going on the inside, something we cannot see. So our Bible reading this morning we recited together comes from the book of Matthew. And Jesus is opening one of the, again, most well-known sermons of all time, talking about blessed. Now this book of Matthew is the first letter to be included in the New Testament. Matthew was one of the original 12 followers of Jesus. He followed Jesus, spent 3 years with Jesus. When Jesus first meets Matthew, Matthew is he's one of those tax collectors. Remember we talked about that last week? He's one of those sinners, one of those extortionists. He was a rich guy, and he made his living off the backs of other people. He spent 3 years with Jesus. Before Jesus was arrested, he saw Jesus put on trial. He saw Jesus executed as a criminal. And then he became a witness, one of the witnesses to Jesus rising from the dead. So Matthew's writing a letter, and he's writing a letter a few years later to some churches who are struggling with, I wonder if what we were told about Jesus is true. Is Jesus to be believed? So this book of Matthew is Matthew's answer to that question. Is Jesus to be believed? Is Jesus who he says he is? In fact, Jesus was executed over his head when Jesus died on the cross. This is the King of the Jews. So Matthew's audience, is that how we're supposed to think of Jesus? So, among the stories and events that Matthew has for us in his letter is this story that we are looking at today, with Jesus on a hillside preaching what we call the Sermon on the Mount. Now, it's a sermon. It's a fairly long one. And when we say mount, we typically think of a mountainside. If we know anything about Israel, for Anybody that grew up in the Rockies or knows anything about the Rockies, it's going to feel more like a hillside, but it is a mount. It's one of Jesus' first sermons early in his ministry. Jesus is baptized. Jesus is tempted by the devil. And he begins to proclaim around the countryside the good news that the kingdom of heaven is here in the person of Jesus. And so, as Jesus begins to proclaim this good news of the kingdom, the good news of the gospel that God is now reaching out to his people in favor, crowds start to follow him around. And so we get to Matthew chapter 5, and all the crowds are following Jesus, and so he sits down on the side of a mountain. And they all sit down, and he delivers this sermon. Now, Jesus' sermon here has a lot of teachings that we're familiar with. The golden rule is here. How we are to treat our enemies is in this. The Lord's Prayer is part of this sermon. So there's a lot of things that we know about this sermon and have come to, that are part of the way we even talk in terms of our Christianity. Judge not that ye be not judged is also in this, right? So there's a lot in this sermon. But Jesus begins this entire sermon with a series of statements talking about blessed. You see, before Jesus is going to talk about ethics and how we're supposed to live and the wise man and the foolish man, he wants his audience to understand who they are. A series of statements. Now, we have in our Western world called these series of statements the Beatitudes. And that's simply a way of saying these are a bunch of platitudes or statements that begin with a statement of blessing. So in this series of blessed statements, Jesus is telling us precisely what it means to be blessed. And notice that I have said statements. These are statements of fact. And if you've been around Christianity long enough to hear people talk about this series of blessed statements, then you probably have heard somebody talk about these series of statements as if they were commands, as if these were a standard to be lived up to, as if these are a bunch of good principles that we are supposed to follow in order to be blessed. But that's not how Jesus is presenting it to his audience. These are statements of fact. This is already true about the people he's talking to, about those who have been touched by this good news that the kingdom is here, that Jesus is offering life and forgiveness. This is true of those people. These statements are not Beatitudes, which is another. You can get on the internet and say, oh yeah, this is a series of Beatitudes. These are attitudes that we're supposed to be. No. These are statements of fact. This is what it means to have embraced the good news of who Jesus is and what he does for his people. In fact, if we were to look at these things, it should be a tip-off right away. If we start looking at these things as like commands or principles to follow, how many of us have followed these? I've even seen places where these have been compared to the 10 Commandments. And then you have to step back and you have to ask yourself, have any of us ever done any of those things perfectly or rightly or even come close? You see, you understand there's only one person that ever lived up to those statements. It's the person delivering it. So these are not principles. These are characteristics of those who have embraced Jesus and have enjoyed his favor. This is who you are in Jesus. All of these things. They are best understood, the one we're going to focus in on today, because I think it is a summary, it is the opening statement, and all of the other statements flow out of this one. If you get this one right, if you understand who you are in that first statement, then you will understand the rest. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Now, when we talk about, there are some that will drop off in spirit, poor in spirit, and you'll hear some talk about, well, blessed are the poor, blessed are those who don't have a lot of money. That's not what Jesus is saying at all. No, he literally says, blessed are the poor in spirit. He's actually quoting from the Old Testament. Blessed are those who are spiritually poor, who are spiritually bankrupt, who understand they have nothing to offer to God. And it's once you understand that, and you understand your need for Jesus, it's then that the kingdom of heaven is yours. Blessed are those who have no hope of salvation within themselves. Those who have nothing to offer, those who are at their worst and they know it. Those who are at the end of their ropes, those who are at the end of themselves and are embracing Jesus. It's those who possess the very kingdom of heaven. All of the promises of the Old Testament that God is going to rule His people through a ruler, in a reign, and in a place, coming to fulfillment in Jesus, all that is yours. You're blessed. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. There's nothing that you can conjure up to get there. You're already blessed because of who Jesus is. To hear the word and believe in Jesus and who He is and embrace His gospel, that's what it means to be blessed. See, being blessed starts with realizing that we don't have anything. And from Jesus' mouth to those with nothing comes a word of utter promise. You see, these aren't simply even a series of statements. These are promises. These are promises to the people on the hillside, to Matthew's audience, to us. Blessed. You're blessed. The poor in spirit, those who know they have nothing without Jesus. The reign of heaven belongs to us, belongs to you. See, Jesus came to seek and to save those who are lost. In fact, in Matthew, just a few chapters prior, the promise of the angel to Joseph in the middle of the night, you are going to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. And a few short chapters later, Jesus is all grown up, and he's proclaiming the good news, and he's sitting on a hillside, and he's saying, blessed are those who are the sinners, the spiritually bankrupt, for it's theirs who have the kingdom. A kingdom where God rules and reigns through the blood of His Son. You see, hashtag blessed. Hashtag blessed has nothing to do, even though, again, that's the narrative out there, but it has nothing to do with what we are doing for ourselves. Material wealth, popularity, fame, fortune, good health, great job, great family, great wife. No. It's about who Jesus is and who we are in Him and what we don't have and our need of Him. If you've ever been to a Mexican village in a laguna off of the Gulf about 2 hours south of here, then you'd have a pretty good understanding of what it means to be blessed. See, home after home in this Mexican village, just 2x4s, concrete blocks, and tin roofs. And yet a thriving, joyful community of people who understand themselves to be blessed beyond measure. And when you're among them, you begin to realize that all the things that you think are great and the reasons why you're blessed pale in comparison to their joy in Jesus, who they are in Him, and what they have. You see, that kind of joy, that kind of blessedness is not dependent on our external circumstances. It's dependent on who Jesus is and what He was for us in the cross. We're blessed because we have nothing to offer. And yet Jesus gives us the kingdom. See, blessed are those who acknowledge that they are unworthy of Christ and His gift of forgiveness. Because it's from that position of unworthiness then that we are most likely to have it. That's the upside down kingdom. And by the way, if you start to read then through these next 3 chapters, Matthew 5, Matthew 6, Matthew 7, it's all upside down. Even in going into the Lord's Prayer. If you want to have greatness, then get in your closet. Everything is inverted. If you want to have success here in this world, then you lay up your treasures someplace else in heaven. It's all upside down. We belong to an upside down kingdom. It's from our position of unworthiness that we are most likely, and again, we are promised the kingdom because of it. Because in our unworthiness, we embrace Jesus and His gospel for us. Martin Luther understood this, and it's interesting, this was actually on his lips the night he died. His very last words, knowing he was about to see Jesus, he says this, "We are all beggars. This is true." Now, if I picked last statements that I'm going to leave for my posterity, I probably would have something a little more grander. But there is nothing more important, and he knew it facing death itself. We are all beggars. He lived his entire life on that idea. That without Jesus, we don't have anything, and we are nothing. We are beggars in need of a Jesus who saves us. With nothing to offer God, we are then being prepared to receive Jesus and be blessed. See, these beatitudes, these pronouncements of blessings are for those who know they are helpless. And so we come to this entire assembly. You hear me say it from week to week. We come to this entire thing. We're unworthy. We don't deserve this. And so we're here to receive grace from Jesus. And Jesus starts His biggest sermon with this idea about how unworthy we are. And in knowing that unworthiness and knowing that need for Jesus' grace, He then gives us everything. He gives us the kingdom. You see, we spend a lot of our time trying to get blessed. We spend a lot of energy trying to make ourselves blessed. And if we were honest, a lot of all that energy at the end of the day makes us feel really, really empty. There's not any satisfaction in that. Instead of that emptiness, instead of the emptiness that comes from putting my faith and confidence in somebody only to have them let me down, Jesus is offering himself there on the mountain. You see, at the end of the day, as people are listening to him and listening to him make these statements about what it means to be blessed, and they start to look at that and they're like, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. In front of them on that mount is the very one who's going to die, the very one who's going to live up to all those expectations. And it's in Jesus then that these statements are true. You see, even coming to this understanding of being poor in spirit and being spiritually bankrupt, I can't come to that on my own. I need Jesus to be that for me and then to give that to me in faith. I can't come to that conclusion. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Where's humility when I need it? I can't come to that on my own. I need Jesus to be the ultimate humble guy on my behalf because I'm not. And then I put my faith and my trust and I stake my claim on his righteousness and what he's done for me. And in doing so then, blessed are the humble. Will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. I don't do that every day. Are you kidding? I'm too busy trying to create my own little kingdom. Hungering and thirsting after righteousness. No, I needed Jesus to go do that for me. And then give it to me. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. And then he ends it where he began. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. That series of statements, that series of promises is all about this kingdom of heaven, this reign of God who's come to rule his people. So when we're not feeling all that, if we're honest with ourselves and we're not feeling all that blessed and the world is out of control, we understand that we are blessed because there is somebody who is in control, who did die for all this mess, and is with us in the midst of the mess, and is making all of this come true for us. We, you, me, we are blessed people. See, this list of blessings, this is our identity in Jesus. Even when it doesn't feel like it, even when it looks like I've completely blown it. I look at blessed are the peacemakers. I can rest in the fact that Jesus has been the peacemaker for me. And whatever mess I have made, my identity is still with him as a peacemaker. And so that gives me, on the back side of this, living out my identity, I then work to be a peacemaker. I then mourn with those who mourn. I then pursue righteousness. All these things. But it's out of that identity. I'm not trying to be blessed. I'm already blessed, and I'm working from a position of already being blessed with these things. So there's no pressure. There's no performance wheel. Jesus has this. The kingdom is already ours. Believe it this morning in faith. Believe this, believe these promises in faith this morning, and they are yours. The kingdom of heaven is yours by faith. Everything you need is in Jesus, the one who's delivering these promises.